Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back again to the second part of this tutorial, which is the sewing part of this beautiful pencil ruffle skirt with butt contour. So, if you're ready to get to the sewing aspect of it, let's get started. I'll be using 3 yards of this Ankara fabric for the main skirt and this 1.5 yard of this cotton fabric for the lining. So all I'm going to do is to place my pattern on my folded fabric, add my sewing allowance of 1 inch by the side, 2 inch at the bottom for folding, and ½ inch at the top waist side. So I'm going to notch my hip line and also notch my folding allowance. So same thing applies to the back. I'm going to add 1 inch by the side, 2 inches at the bottom and half at the top. So I'm just going to cut it and I'm going to notch my hip and my zip allowance and my dart. Notching the zip allowance will help you differentiate between the two sides of the skirt. As you can see, the zip and the side both look alike. For the lining, I'm going to fold my 2 inch folding allowance and another 2 inch again to reduce the lining by 4 inch. So I'm just going to cut that and I'm going to put all my notches and I'm going to cut the same for the front. So for the ruffles, I'm going to fold my fabric using 8 inches. So I'm going to cut it and so I'm going to keep cutting and joining till I have a very long stripe. After cutting out my ruffle piece, I was able to have two long stripe. So I'm just going to curve the ends because I don't want it to have a sharp edge. So I'm going to curve it and take it to my machine and stitch it. After stitching both ends of my ruffle piece, this is how it looks. So I'm just going to take it to the machine, sew 2 running stitches on it for gather. So after running the 2 stitches on it, I'm just going to gently drag the thread and pull the fabric together to create my gather. So I'm just going to do this to get a reasonable length. And after that, I just went on to iron my skirts. I ironed down my 1 inch sewing allowance on the skirts. I also ironed my 1 inch zip allowance. I also ironed my 2 inch folding allowance. So I did this for all the pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to join the front and the back, take it to my sewing machine and stitch on the 1 inch sewing allowance. And I'm also going to do the same for the lining. So right now I'm just joining the front and the back side seams together. I'm sewing out my 1 inch sewing allowance on all the pieces, that's including the lining and the fabric, and I'm also putting my darts, which is very important. So after joining the front and the back pieces and putting my darts, I'm just going to go and neatly iron each and every part. So when ironing your side seam, please make sure you iron with your seams open so that you will have a neater look. So right now, after ironing my pieces, I'm going to join the front and the back together, right side facing right side. So I'm just pinning the same side together. Please ensure that they fit properly, right? They are equal. If it's not equal, if you are pinning in and you find out that one part is longer than part, please go back and adjust it and make sure that they fit perfectly well without having any excess on any of the fabric. So after pinning this, I'm just going to join the lining and the fabric using a ½ inch stitch. And please ensure that your seams are open while stitching this part, okay? So after joining this is how the bottom part is going to look. I've just dragged it up. You can see the 2 inches folding. So I'm going to flip this to the wrong side so that we can close our zip allowance. So first of all, I'm going to measure my slit length on my zip allowance, and my slit length is 12 inches. So I'm going to close my zip allowance from my 12-inch slit length. That's where my slit starts from. So I'm going to close it all the way to 1 inch below my hip line, leaving just my zip space unsewn. So I'm just going to sew this and leave my zip allowance open where I'm going to fix the zip. So now I'm just going to turn it so that you see how it looks. So you can see I've closed this part. You can see the slit is open and you can see the zip allowance is open. So now I'm just going to fix this 12 inches zip. So I'm going to turn the zip to the other side and stitch it down. You can decide to use a zipper foot for this, but I decided to use my regular straight foot for this. So after stitching the zip on this side, I'm just going to close it and turn to the wrong side and fix the zip on the other side. So after fixing my zipper, this is how it looks. So please ensure you iron after fixing your zipper. So the next step now will be to turn the waist. So to turn the waist, I'm just going to turn the skirt to the wrong side and pin the waist sides together, right side facing right side. I'm going to pin the seam sides together, as you can see, and I'm just going to sew 1/2 inch all the way. So after turning my waist by stitching the lining to the fabric, I'm just going to top stitch on the lining part. So I'm just going to move the excess allowance towards the lining side and stop stitch on this. But I'm going to turn to the right side and give it a good ironing. After ironing it, this is how it looks. Okay, so I ironed the whole skirt. So you can see how neat it looks and how the lining is sitting perfectly well. So the next step now will be to turn the zip allowance side. So as you can see, this part is for this and this part is for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it to the wrong side to be able to do the stitching. So now to close the zip allowance, I'm just going to sew on the 1 inch zip allowance which I already ironed. So I'm just going to pin this first, so it's going to be easy for me to sew. So I'm just going to pin it all the way down. And I'm going to stitch on that 1 inch allowance. You can already see the ironing has created the crease line for me. So I'm just going to follow that line and stitch all the way down to the zip. So this is automatically going to close one side for me, and then we'll be left with the other side. Now let's close the other side. So the difference between this side is that I'm not going to close all the zip allowance. I'm going to leave about 8 inches below the zip in order to be able to use that space to turn the fabric to the right side. So I'm going to close it, leaving just that 8-inch allowance for turning it. I stitched it behind camera, and right now I'm turning it out to the right side through that whole spacing I made. You can see the 8 inches that I left open. So I'm just trying to bring out all the edges of these waists and the bottom, and you can see how neat it looks. So what I'm going to do is that for this hole, you can decide to hand stitch this, or you can use a hemming glue to close this. So I'm going to go and use hemming glue to iron this down. So after ironing everything down, this is how it looks. You can see the butt room popping up for the butts. And when I flip it to the wrong side, you can see how neat the skirt is. So now let's get to the ruffle part. So I'm just going to measure where I want, how low I want my ruffle to be and how high I want it to be by the sides. So I'm going to draw an arc which my ruffle will follow at the front, and I'm going to do the same at the back. So after that, I'm going to use my tape and measure the lines, the arc which I have drawn, so that I can gather my ruffle to the exact length. So now I'm going to gather this ruffle more so that I'll get my exact length. And I've joined the two ruffles together to have one long piece. So after doing that, I'm going to weave this to knitting the mouth using my weaving machine. So I've just weaved it now, and now I am pinning this ruffle to my skirt this way. Okay, so I'm just going to use needle to pin this, and I'm going to go behind the camera and use my sewing machine to stitch on it, and we are going to see the final result of our beautiful pencil ruffle skirt. And yay, this is the final result. You can see how beautiful and exaggerated my butt is. You can see the curves. You can see how clingy the skirt is to my body. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and share. And see you next time. Bye.